Ladies and gentlemen, my name's Paul. Hope you're having an amazing day. The next generation of graphics cards from Intel, NVIDIA and AMD are almost here. And the great news is that particularly if you're a budget gamer, well, now is a great time to be getting into PC gaming because the next generation of cards really does seem to be pretty impressive from a price/performance standpoint. So let's just get everyone up to the same page. I'll do this really quickly, although you can skip forward a minute or two into the video if you already know this stuff. But back in mid-November, the 18th if memory serves, I released a video where I was talking about Battlemage's performance numbers, and roughly speaking I was told G21, which powers the 570 and 580, was going to be on par, roughly speaking, with an RTX 4060 Ti, and the G31, which are the higher end variants, that's going to be a little bit slower perhaps than the RTX 4070 Super. Now I want you guys to put a pin on G31 because we're going to talk more about that in just a second. I want to focus first of all on the lower performance cards. So we also saw some retail price leaks, and these have basically been pegging the graphics cards to be low $200 US. Now it is important to realize that Intel have not confirmed these prices yet, so it does mean that the retailer may have listed them incorrectly, but around $230 US for a couple of cards was actually listed. So I'm sure you would agree that if that's true, well, that's pretty impressive. However, since then, Golden Pig Upgrade, who is a very well-known leaker online, has basically said, and you can read this yourself, that for the lower end cards for Battlemage and RDNA 4, this does seem to be correct. That basically Intel as well as AMD are going to be going fully out for the budget options, and so they're going to be roughly on par with an RTX 4060 Ti. Now let's kind of get an idea of how that falls in the grand scheme of things. So if we were to take a real quick peek at a review, I'm going to do this really quick, we're just going to scan over this, we'll look at Tech PowerUp's RTX 4060 Ti review. So starting out with ray tracing at the resolution of 1440p as well as 1080p, which I think we can agree that these cards are going to be most at home with. Roughly speaking, the 4060 Ti is essentially identical to the 3070, again in ray tracing performance, and a little bit slower than the 6900 XT. And the same could also be said, of course, for 1080p as well. Now, finally, for the performance anyway, we'll just look at the raster performance. So of course this is with ray tracing disabled, and again using the 100% mark for the 4060 Ti. I'm going to focus just for a second at 1440p. We can see that the 3070 is just a titch faster, 104. I would basically consider that margin of error, and the same thing could be said for 1080p. Meanwhile, something like the 3070 Ti is around 10% faster, depending on the resolution. So I think we can all agree that in terms of a generational leap, well, it's not really so much of a leap, it's more of a slight hop. The other thing was that this card cost, if memory serves, $400 US MSRP, and of course that was for 8 gigabytes. So if the prices here for Intel's card is true, and I use that with a big caveat, and AMD can do the same kind of pricing, again that's a big caveat, that's not bad because we actually have some updates regarding the specifications. So regarding the B570 and 580, I want to give credit to videocards.com here. We have basically a leak for the 580 emerged courtesy of a Geekbench leak a few days ago, and I covered that. And this is 20 Xe cores, around 2.8 gigahertz, and 12 gigabytes of memory with 192-bit bus. Not too shabby. Meanwhile, the 570 has had a small cut. It's 18 Xe cores, 2.6 gigahertz, so I'm sure there's going to be, overclocked models, which is probably going to put that to a similar level, but either way, doesn't really matter, and 10 gigabytes of GDDR6 memory. So basically speaking, the memory bus, of course, gets cut a little bit, but I don't think 10 gigabytes is awful. I mean, I do much prefer the 12, but again, it will depend, of course, on the pricing. So I think that these are going to be pretty impressive cards for a 1080p screen. So I think going back just one more time, we'll look at the Golden Pig upgrade statement. So if these two can outperform, or at least be roughly on par with a 4060 Ti, for around the $200 mark, $250 mark, I think that that is pretty good. I would have loved for the cards to be like $199, but I'm sure everyone would agree that, you know, we'd also like the cards to be like $10, you know. But I think given everything, these are going to be pretty impressive, and it's going to be very interesting to see what pressure this puts on NVIDIA. It's going to also be quite curious to see what the sales are like of Battlemage. Now, I do also just want to touch a moment longer on Intel stuff, because there's an interesting article over at BenchLife. Of course, I'll leave a link to this in the video description, and what they are stating here is that basically speaking, the higher end G31 cards may not launch until the third quarter of 2025. Now, I don't know exactly where they're getting this information from, but what I will tell you, and I mentioned this in a previous video like a week ago at this point, I've heard that there is a possibility the high-end G31 cards have been canned. So I don't know whether they will end up releasing or not. Basically, they are Schrodinger's GPU at this point. I've got some sources who tell me they are not certain. They've basically said that they think that they may be canned, but they also may launch in the early part, at some part next year, like the first to second quarter is what I was told by some people, and others are basically telling me they are definitely canned and they are not releasing. I don't know what the reason is though, because I mean, maybe there was some delay in the design or something I'm unaware of. I'll try to dig into it more. But yeah, it could be that they don't feel that they can release them at high enough volume. Having said all of this, to be very honest with you guys, from a market share perspective, if Intel can release these cards at around $230 to $250, again, we'll see, I will be absolutely okay with that, with a roughly RTX 4060 Ti. In fact, I would love for them to release them even cheaper, but obviously they need to make some margins, because I think, one, it's going to breed a lot of competition in the market, and two, I think from an Intel perspective, just having a lot of competition on the market is a really good thing. I also talked recently that Jakin on Twitter has basically confirmed that after Battlemage, Celestial is still on, and probably Druid as well. So Intel are probably not going to be leaving the discrete GPU market anytime soon, and frankly, I think that's a fantastic thing for us. Anyway, Intel, of course, will be doing a formal announcement of all of their graphics stuff pretty soon. As for AMD, again, they are following roughly the same performance trajectory, it's going to seem, but of course, once again, N48 is still on. After N48, of course, their next generation card is RDNA 5, or to give it its proper name, UDNA. And it does seem like UDNA is going to be offering a much higher performance tier, so it's going to be very interesting to see how the market shapes up. With that said, guys, take care of yourselves, have an amazing day. Bye for now.